Hello, and welcome back to Inspire. In my first video on shame, I shared with you the difference between shame and guilt, how shame disrupts the energy of our natural expressions, and how it negatively affects the body's 7 major chakras. In this, part 2, I will elaborate more on how shame affects the mind and body and how to work with this powerful resistance. In part 1, I spoke on how shame is one of the greatest resistances to furthering our growth and consciousness as human beings. Remember, shame is a judgment on the character of a person rather than on their actions. Remember also that shame is nothing more than a manifestation and container for fearful beliefs that we embody about ourselves. That we aren't good enough, that we don't measure up, or that somehow we are a bad person. So let's go a little deeper. Although shame and guilt are distinct in nature, they are very much intertwined in their expressions. For example, let's take a person who has been told their entire life that they would never measure up to some standard, that either their looks, their abilities, their social status, their family history, etc., prevented them from excelling or achieving some level of success. After years of this shaming, if the person doesn't have the wherewithal to pull themselves out of these messages, one of two things are likely to happen: an implosion or an explosion. Let's first look at how shame causes the body and mind to implode. As I said in the first video, shame causes us to suppress our natural abilities and expressions. We turn against ourselves and our body. Remember, what you suppress will often lead to your depression. This is why many people who wrestle with shame messages often become depressed and insecure people, never rocking the boat, never playing big, and usually hiding out so as not to be ridiculed. This hiding out can start a chain reaction or shame cycle of unhealthy behavior as methods of coping take hold. One might turn to recreational drugs, alcohol, unhealthy relationships, or unhealthy physical behaviors like binging, purging, cutting, or a host of other methods to numb out and block out shame's debilitating messages. In the book Eastern Body, Western Mind, Anadea Judith states that shame finds its penance in suffering, and the need to recreate misery and failure keep one in a very unhappy state of equilibrium. Ultimately, the vibration of shame will attract and buttress future shame. And this is where shame and guilt become bedfellows. All the activities mentioned above, drug abuse, alcoholism, and so forth, are often shunned by society. This is when guilt rises and says, "You have done something wrong and very dangerous." Too often the message is received as, "You are wrong and bad for doing this thing." And this tends to lead the person in a cycle of drowning their guilty behavior with more shameful coping. The more shame they feel, the more guilty behaviors they exhibit. The more guilty behaviors they exhibit, the more shame they feel, and on and on. With imploding, shame creates in our bodies a type of black hole that drains our energy, our desires, and our very life force. We begin to hate ourselves and the world for who and how we are, and this will always show up in the body. As we begin to implode, the body will start to show signs of shrinkage. The head will become bowed, the shoulders might sink in and down, and the entire frame of the body will compress itself to become smaller and unassuming. We see the same reaction in dogs that have been reprimanded. Too often, when shame cannot be shaken, suicide becomes the only way out. One of shame's ultimate and final expressions is the killing of the host. Now let's turn to the aspect of shame's explosive dynamic. Wherein before the hate, bitterness, and violence is turned inward, shame's explosive aspect is quite the opposite. In the context of fear being the container for shame, let me share a wise yet foreboding quote from the great Master Yoda to a then much younger Anakin Skywalker. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Instead of shame's messages of inferiority being fueled for your own self-destruction, all that fear and anger is thrust outward in violence against others. These are folks who are often very judgmental and critical. They can be hypervigilant towards others' faults and shortcomings as a ruse to hide from their own. Because their own shame messages have caused them to deny their own healthy self-expression, they often shame others in order to prevent them from expressing theirs. Again, shame begets shame. Whereas shame's implosive characteristics can lead to the death of the host, either slowly or suddenly, shame's explosive aspects can often lead to the death of others, again slowly or suddenly. For instance, rare is the case of a school shooting where the perpetrators weren't either shamed at home or by their fellow schoolmates long beforehand. Shame's big lie is that in order to end it, you must either end yourself or end those doing the shaming. Regardless how you see this, shame is destructive. So what do we do with all of this? How do we combat messages that are so pervasive and intertwined in our social fabric? Viola Davis, in her 2017 Oscar acceptance speech, said that there is one place that all the people with the greatest potential are gathered. One place, and that's the graveyard. This statement speaks deeply to the ways that many of us have played small because we were afraid of being our amazingly powerful and beautiful selves. We never lived up to our potential. And this is what fear, in the guise of shame, does. In starting to work with your own shame messages, it is important to approach this task with the utmost honesty, inquiry, care, and support. And there is one important question that must first be answered. Whose shame are you wearing? I believe there are four major avenues where shame messages emanate the strongest: religious communities, family structures, social or communal environments, and ourselves. And too often, the messages we wrestle with are a combination of all of them, like a monstrous four-headed chimera. For many folks, myself included, religious shame is the most sinister of all of them because it strikes at the very spirit, nature, and essence of who we are as human beings and our place in the cosmos. Entire theologies, denominations, and paths have been constructed with shame as their cornerstone. How many ways can a person be told and consistently reinforced that they are a sinner without it negatively affecting their self-esteem and confidence? It is my belief that if more folks were honest with themselves, they would recognize the psychological damage these messages have had. Shame that comes from our families is just as potent because these messages find their way into our lives and our bodies long before we are actually able to create coherent thoughts. Many families balance love with correction with minimal to no shame, but for many others, this experience is quite foreign. I have already spoken a great deal about our overriding societal or communal shame messages. We are constantly being bombarded with these. Here's a good thing to remember. Almost everyone you come in contact with, almost everyone you meet, is wrestling with some type of shame message or another. I would argue that almost all of us are trying to live up to some external standard. You are not alone. Lastly are the shame messages we conclude about ourselves by piecing together all the other parts of our life lessons and experiences with others. These messages can be the most persistent and frequent because they are with us even when no one else is around. The second question to ask when working with your shame is, who am I, really? When all the religious, familial, societal, and personal shame messages are set aside, who am I? You see, shame silences our voice from expressing who we really want to be in the world. We actually lose our ability to speak up for ourselves. As a practicing tantrika, it is my firm belief that shame can be healed and transformed through the power of pleasure. Pleasure is not just about sex. It can simply be listening to a piece of music, talking to a great friend, eating good food, dancing, drawing, or taking a long nap. Shame is the enemy of pleasure. So what better way to combat it than to fall in love with what your body, your mind, and your soul find pleasurable? I always tell my clients that change is in the doing. Give yourself permission to find pleasure again. You can do this alone or within loving community. Because so much shame comes from certain communities, the inverse is also true. Shame cannot exist in the continual company of an accepting, loving, compassionate, and empathetic community. Find a community that accepts your vulnerability and true self. And remember that acceptance is not the same as tolerance. Acceptance is an embracing, a letting in, a welcoming of a person for all of who they are, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. Loving acceptance sees the inherent goodness of the heart. Tolerance, however, means most literally to bear against pain or endure hardship. This is an embracing of only parts of a person while negatively judging and shaming other parts. Tolerance is about enduring, and no one wants to be endured. So when looking for a welcoming community, be sure to find one that doesn't just say they accept you, but also practices conscious, loving acceptance. Surround yourself with people that will affirm your worth and uniqueness. I also highly recommend finding a good therapist, energy worker, or some other reputable alternative healer to help you process your shame. Because shame is also a container for fear, working with your shame is a great way to be more conscious about what you're afraid of. Take one shame message at a time and ask yourself, what is the underlying fear in this belief? And is it true? Many fears cannot stand up against the weight of honest inquiry and scrutiny. Be gentle with yourself during this inquiry. Then see if there is some way you can bring pleasure to meet your fear. How can you add play to your inquiry? You can do this alone, but it might be a good idea to bring a trusted friend along for support. For instance, if you're working with the shame message, I'm not attractive enough, first ask yourself if that's really true, and if you are comparing yourself to someone else. Most of the shame we experience is due in part to our incessant obsession with comparing ourselves with others. Then ask yourself why you feel you aren't attractive. Then make a list of how you feel you are attractive. Then add pleasure. You might want to do an experiment where you play dress up with one or two friends. This can be everything from lace to leather, or both. Have them affirm what looks good on you, and you them, and go from there. This is just a small practice, but it can be an important and potent one. But remember that when shame messages come up, don't remain silent. Either say something or do something to combat it, or bring pleasure to your fear. This isn't about coping. This is about adding consciousness, pleasure, to your fear as a means of transforming it. So be creative. So that concludes my talk on shame. It is such a huge topic and much more can be said on it. But I hope that the information and tools I share with you today help bring you into a truer sense of your expression and how you want to be. Please feel free to write me at spiritual.eros@gmail.com or leave your comments and questions below if you need further ideas on how to work with your own shame messages. And as always, please check out our website at www.spiritualeros.com and subscribe to our channel to be notified of upcoming talks. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching. Many blessings on your journey. Take care.